You smell it first. It's not blood, not sweat, not the musk of soldiers in a campaign tent or the wet rot of cannons in storage. It is something darker, acidic, metallic, and bitter, something inside a man trying to claw its way out. You're standing in a quiet room on the island of Saint Helena. Outside, the wind howls over volcanic cliffs and salty rocks. Inside, Napoleon Bonaparte, once Emperor of France, master of Europe, the man who crowned himself, lays in a wooden bed. His face is puffy, his legs are cold, his abdomen distended. He hasn't eaten in days. His lips are cracked, and now, he is vomiting black blood into a porcelain basin. He doesn't speak, he doesn't scream, his body just folds forward like cloth, and with each retch, you hear the sound of a man collapsing inwards. This is not how emperors are supposed to die. Not on an island no larger than a provincial town. Not surrounded by British jailers. Not watched only by a few loyal servants. And certainly, not like this. But this is what you witness. The blood isn't red, it's black, thick, grainy, clotted, and it has the smell of rusted iron and old meat. It sticks to the sides of the basin like oil. There is no dignity in this. There is only the final decay of power. He tries to rise, but falls back. His breath is slow, labored. His belly, bloated beyond recognition, looks like it belongs to a different man. And the once proud general who marched across Europe, from Egypt to Austerlitz, now asks for a spoonful of crushed ice to keep from choking on his own bile. You are not dreaming. You are not reading a history book. You are standing at the end of something immense. Not just a man, not just a reign, but the collapse of an empire inside a body. And that body is rotting from within. You are not a tourist in time. You are a witness, and what you're about to remember may never leave you again. If what you're about to witness leaves you shaken, unsettled, or strangely silent, consider subscribing. Not for the numbers, but to give breath back to voices long buried by time. If it brings you value, leave a like. If it stays with you, leave silence. These stories were never meant to vanish. And neither were the dead. It is the year 1821. The location: Longwood House, Saint Helena, a wind-blasted outpost of volcanic rock, lost in the South Atlantic Ocean, over 1.200 miles from the nearest continent. This is not a battlefield. This is not a palace. This is a prison for a dying emperor. You've been here for months. Not by choice, but because you serve. You wear no sword. You bear no titles. But you are here, and that makes you a witness. Napoleon Bonaparte has been confined here since October 1815. After his defeat at Waterloo and final surrender to the British, he expected leniency. He expected exile on English soil. What he received instead was total isolation. No newspapers, no letters uninspected, no French visitors without strict British approval. And slowly, month after month, his body began to betray him. In the beginning, it was insomnia, then fatigue, then episodes of nausea so severe, he would curl into himself and weep. British doctors assigned to monitor him, such as Dr. Archibald Arnott and Barry O'Meara, noted early signs of gastric distress, including stomach pains that worsened after meals and severe constipation alternating with diarrhea. In his journals, O'Meara described a persistent vomiting of coffee-colored fluid, a classic historical symptom of upper gastrointestinal bleeding. The term, black blood, was often used in this period to refer to this regurgitated digested blood, a result of ulcers or gastric carcinoma. By March 1821, the symptoms were unmistakable. You see them yourself. He can no longer keep food down. His abdomen, particularly the epigastric region, is so tender that even the weight of a bedsheet makes him cry out. His voice grows thinner, his hands tremble, and though he denies it, he is afraid. You are there when he writes his last will. I die prematurely, assassinated by the English oligarchy and their hired murderer. His suspicion burns brighter than his fever. Every doctor, every servant, every flick of wind becomes a possible conspirator in his mind. But his death, you know, does not come from daggers or poison. It comes from within. The French physician Francesco Antomarchi, summoned to attend Napoleon in his final months, documented the rapid expansion of his stomach, frequent retching of black matter, and increasing delirium. But even Antomarchi, loyal though he was, could not reverse the decline. The emperor's final room, once adorned with maps and military dispatches, is now filled with the scent of linens soaked in dark fluid. You are the one tasked with changing them. You do so silently, quickly, never meeting his gaze, because his eyes, though sunken, still hold something that resembles judgment. British officers like Sir Hudson Lowe, Napoleon's jailer, maintain official appearances. They claim he is well cared for. But you know what they don't say. What the public doesn't hear. You see the red stains on the pillow, the shaking hand that cannot hold a quill, the bitter herbs forced into his mouth by trembling fingers. And as April fades into May, he becomes more a sack of organs than a man. His abdomen now resembles a drum, taut, swollen, unnaturally still. On the night of May 4th, the vomiting worsens. You are called to clean the basin. You see the sticky blackness that coats the porcelain. It smells of iron and death. His pulse is weak. His breathing rattles. At 5:49 p.m. on May 5th, 1821, Napoleon Bonaparte dies, not with a sword in his hand, not surrounded by legions, but in a small room, far from France, covered in sweat, mouth stained black, eyes half open. His last words, according to multiple witnesses, were, "France, armée, tête d'armée, Joséphine. France, army, head of the army, Joséphine." And then, silence. You hold the basin still. You do not cry, because history, when it dies in front of you, has no need for tears. The exile's symptoms begin. You remember when it started. Not with a scream, not with a collapse, but with something quieter, a refusal. A plate of food untouched. A faint wave of the hand. A bowl of broth pushed away. At first, it meant nothing. The emperor often fasted when in thought. He spent hours alone in his garden on Saint Helena, walking in slow circles, dictating memoirs to his companions. He would scowl at the sea, pace, then eat nothing. But then, he stopped rising from bed. You were in the room when Montholon entered that morning. The blankets had not moved. The lamp had burned through the night. The emperor, Napoleon Bonaparte, once the master of half of Europe, was shivering, sweating, and silent. He complained of a pressure under his ribs. His skin was flushed. His sheets were soaked. And when he finally turned to speak, you smelled it. Bile, sour and sharp, clinging to his breath. British physician Dr. Archibald Arnott was summoned immediately. His notes describe what you already suspected, that this was not a passing illness. It was the beginning of something deeper, something that would eat him from the inside out. For weeks, he had reported loss of appetite, nausea, intermittent vomiting, and pain in the epigastric region, just below the breastbone. Arnott feared a peptic ulcer or worse. Napoleon had once confided, long before, that his own father had died of stomach cancer. Now, the signs returned in the sun. The vomiting increased, but the color was wrong. You saw it when you helped change his linens. It wasn't bile, it was darker, thicker, and when he vomited again that afternoon, the basin you carried away was filled with clotted, grainy, black matter, the unmistakable symptom of upper gastrointestinal hemorrhage. Café au lait, they called it in the old medical texts. But there was no warmth in this color, just death. The doctors applied what medicine they could. Leeches, poultices, blisters. They administered calomel, a mercury-based purgative believed to balance the humors. They pressed herbs and mustard plasters to his abdomen. But it all ended the same, black blood. In silence. With pain. You wiped his lips. You saw the man's jaw tighten when his bowels loosened without warning. You heard him say nothing as the fluid soaked his sheets and left a streak across the mattress. By April of 1821, he could no longer stand unassisted. His legs had become weak. His belly, so grotesquely swollen, groaned when touched. He sweated through 2 shirts a night, and his once famous appetite had become a ghost. When the French physician Antomarchi arrived, he recorded what you lived through, vomiting so violent it left his throat raw and lips bleeding. He compared Napoleon's abdominal swelling to that of dropsy or a growing tumor. There was talk of liver damage, ascites, and possibly even gastric carcinoma. But you didn't need a diagnosis. You could smell the truth. The room began to change. Curtains remained drawn. Fresh linen had to be burned. Silverware was no longer used. He could not hold a spoon. He drank from a straw. You brought it to his lips. And when you did, you could see his hands, once strong enough to hold a saber, now trembled like reeds in wind. His face had changed, not in a way age usually allows, but in the way illness demands. His cheeks had sunk, his lips cracked, his eyes lost their clarity. The once vibrant red of his military sash was now laid across a body so pale and sweat-soaked. You could hardly see the man who once led the charge at Austerlitz. Even his voice betrayed him. At night, he whispered to himself, not prayers, not strategy, but names. Josephine, sometimes. Lodi, Arcole, Egypt. His lips moved as if reliving the glories in fevered fragments. But they always ended with the same dry cough and silence. The servants began to rotate in shifts. Few could endure the smell. You stayed, not because you were brave, but because he was still Napoleon, and no one dared be the first to flee. Arnott and Antomarchi tried to keep him lucid. They offered him chicken broth, barley water, and weak wine. He refused most of it. On occasion, he would force down a spoonful and immediately retch. What came up was black, flecked with brown and green, and smelled of ferment and copper. On April 14th, he dictated his last political will and testament. You were outside the door. You heard every pause, every scratch of the quill. His voice was hoarse. The ink blotched where his hand trembled. He demanded to be buried, on the banks of the Seine, in the midst of the French people whom I have loved so well. But you knew, even then, that would not happen. The British would never allow it. He would die here, on a rock, surrounded by jailers, with only a few Frenchmen and the stink of death to send him off. You remember the night he soiled himself for the first time. He didn't cry out. He didn't move, just looked at you, ashamed. You changed the linens. You wiped him clean. You said nothing, because to speak would be to admit the truth, that the emperor was dying like any man, slowly, painfully, and powerless. He asked for silence after that. No reading, no visitors, just the sound of wind and the creak of the wooden frame beneath him. One night, he tried to rise. You heard the groan. The basin shattered on the floor. And when you rushed in, you found him half on the floor, half on the bed, black blood trailing from his mouth like oil. You picked him up. You smelled his breath. You saw his lips, tinged blue, his hands clammy. He looked at you, and for the first time, he said nothing. Not a word, just the sound of shallow breath, and a single tear that cut through the grime of his cheek. He was done. The next day, the vomiting would resume, but something was different now. He no longer reached for the basin. He simply let it spill onto his shirt, the sheets, the floor. He no longer cared. The body had become a burden he could not bear. And you, still here, still watching, knew it would not be long. The emperor who once dictated the fate of Europe, now could not control his own bowels. And that is how the end began. The autopsy and the black stomach. It's over. He He died on the evening of May 5, 1821, at 5:49 p.m., surrounded by a handful of attendants. You were there. You heard the rattle. You watched his chest rise one last time. Then it stopped. No thunder. No sudden gasp. Just a body that had been emptying itself for weeks. Now finally still. And now, you are standing over what remains. The room reeks. It's not just death. It's acid, rot, and something chemical. Something that lived in his stomach long before he died. His body is being prepared for autopsy. It is not a quiet process. The British authorities insisted on an autopsy in part to dispel rumors of poison, a suspicion raised by Napoleon himself in his final months. He claimed he was being slowly assassinated by the British. Whether delusion or insight, no one could say. But now, the truth lies in flesh. Present in the room, Dr. Francesco Antomarchi, the French physician closest to Napoleon. British doctors Archibald Arnott, Walter Henry, and Thomas Short, as well as various French officers including Montholon and Bertrand. You are not supposed to be here, but you remain quiet, to the side, near the basin that once caught black blood. Now, it catches something else. The incision begins. The moment the abdominal cavity is opened, the smell escapes, violent, hot, and immediate. The pressure inside had built for days. Fluids had been trapped beneath the distended belly. And now they spill. The doctors remove the stomach and place it on a nearby table. It is abnormally large. Its walls are thickened. The inner lining is blackened in several places. The room goes quiet. You edge closer. What they find, what history would record, is this. A massive ulcer in the pyloric region of the stomach, approximately the size of a silver dollar. Its edges are raised and hardened. The surrounding tissue is discolored, black, brown, greenish, in some areas gangrenous. Antomarchi describes it as a cancerous ulcer of the stomach, a diagnosis that would later be echoed in medical reviews across Europe. The official cause of death recorded was ulcerous stomach cancer. The black blood you saw in the final days? Now explained. The ulcer had likely eroded a major artery in the stomach lining, causing intermittent bleeding. Each episode brought him closer to death. The fact that he survived as long as he did was, by some accounts, a mystery. You glance at the basin again. It is now stained with something far worse than blood. A dark, curdled soup of necrotic tissue, digested food, and yellow-gray fluid. It smells sweet, in the wrong way, like death trying to mask itself. Some in the room mutter about poison, but the doctors are unconvinced. Arsenic leaves traces. Mercury causes different damage. There is no chemical residue, just a body hollowed out by disease. They continue the dissection. The liver is enlarged. The mesentery is thick with fat. The heart, surprisingly, is not enlarged, though the vessels suggest periodic hypertension. The lungs show signs of congestion, perhaps from days of lying flat, motionless. But it is the stomach that tells the story. You stare at the blackened cavity. It resembles burnt parchment, wrinkled and torn, and in the center, the hole, a pit of rot. It had not perforated, meaning it had not yet eaten through entirely. But it was close, too close. Had it ruptured, death would have come violently, rapidly. Instead, he suffered, slowly, repeatedly vomiting the iron-smelling remains of his own insides until the body gave out. They clean the stomach with cloths soaked in wine and vinegar. You watch the cloth darken with each pass. Some whisper prayers, others scribble notes. The atmosphere is tense, not solemn, clinical, frightened. This was Napoleon. This was Europe's scourge, and now he is a specimen. His brain is not examined. Antomarchi insists it remain untouched. But later rumors will suggest mental decline, possible stroke, even neurological damage from mercury exposure during earlier treatments. But these are speculations. What you see is enough. The emperor who once crowned himself in Notre Dame Cathedral who stood on battlefields soaked in the blood of nations, who dined with kings and bent popes to his will, is now open. Exposed, dissected, like any other man, his entrails are removed and placed in a sealed silver urn. His heart is requested by some to be preserved in brandy, but the request is denied. The stomach, though, the black ulcer, the cancer, it becomes a relic of its own. Sketches are made. Medical students in Britain later copy them for instruction. Some say it looked like a crater on a burned map. The autopsy ends. His body is washed, stitched, dressed in his green uniform of the Chasseurs de la Garde. His boots are polished, his hands are crossed, but you've seen what lies beneath. He will be placed in 4 nested coffins, one of tin, one of mahogany, one of lead, and one of ebony, but no coffin can seal away the truth. His final days were not filled with glory, but with pain, rot, and silence. The stomach is what people remember. He vomited black blood alone on an island. A sentence passed down in journals, in letters, in memory. You recall the final moment of the autopsy, when Antimmarchi covered the open chest with a cloth and whispered something in Corsican. You didn't catch the words, but you remember the tone. It wasn't reverent, it was final. The body was no longer Napoleon. It was just remains. And you, still here, would never forget what black blood looked like when it cooled. The funeral with 4 coffins. His room is colder now. His body has been dressed. The final stitches have been made. But the scent still lingers, vinegar, bile, and what remains of the ulcerous rot. You have opened every window, every shutter, but nothing removes the smell of a stomach that died before the man. You are handed black cloth, mourning attire, but no grand procession awaits. No crowds, no cannons, just wind, stone, and a long wooden box that waits in silence. This is the funeral of Napoleon Bonaparte, and it begins with 4 coffins. The first is tin-lined, meant to contain the last oozing fluids of decomposition. His body, even embalmed with rough British methods, is still unstable. The inner wounds have not stopped leaking. You can see the stains, dark, spreading like rot through cotton. The second coffin is mahogany, polished, brought in by sea weeks earlier. It creaks when touched. The third is lead, as tradition dictates for high-ranking persons, sealed airtight, to delay decay, and to make sure no one disturbs what lies within. The fourth, the final, is ebony black, thick, heavy, cold to the touch, all of them, lined with fabric and flowers. But the fabric cannot erase the truth, and the flowers wilt before noon. He is placed inside. You help lift one side, and for a moment, just a moment, you see his face. Pale, lips cracked, eyes shut not by peace but by fatigue. You do not look again. The coffin is sealed, nail by nail, hammered shut, one by one, and then, silence. It is May 9th, 1821, 4 days after his death. The sky is overcast. British officers in red uniforms stand stiffly by, along with French attendants who do not speak. There is no priest, no parade, no music, only the sound of boots on volcanic gravel, and the faint echo of gulls. The British have chosen the burial site, a small valley called Seine Valley, east of Longwood House. It is unmarked land, shaded by 2 weeping willow trees. Napoleon had once said he found peace there, walking alone, watching birds, but he also requested to be buried on the banks of the Seine, his wish denied. You walk behind the procession. The trail is rough. His coffin is pulled on a small cart, dragged slowly by a few horses and 4 men. There are no cheering crowds, no French banners, only wind, earth, and the growing distance between empire and flesh. When they reach the valley, they pause. A grave has been dug, 8 feet deep, surrounded by stone. The air is thick with moisture. The only sound is the hammering of metal as the coffin is lowered. Layer by layer, tin, mahogany, lead, ebony, each one swallowed by the island. A stone slab is placed above the grave, but there is no name engraved, no cross, no imperial eagle, no crown, only a flat, blank tablet. The British governor, Sir Hudson Lowe, refused to inscribe Napoleon on the stone. He argued it implied imperial legitimacy. The French objected. No agreement was reached, so the stone remained nameless. The grave, anonymous. You stand among the small group, 12 in total. No more. Montholon reads a few lines. Bertrand wipes his eyes. A single British captain salutes. And then, nothing. No hymns. No last words. No fanfare. Just earth, falling. The noise of soil striking the lid echoes like gunfire in the valley. You remain after the others leave. You sit by the willows, watching mist rise through the stones. The island is quiet, but inside you, a riot of memory. You remember the man who arrived in 1815, proud, angry, defiant, still believing he might return to France one day. You remember the hours he spent dictating history, his history. You remember the footsteps pacing through the gardens, the arguments with his jailers, the flashes of genius through fever and despair. And now, all of that is beneath your feet, sealed in silence, 4 coffins deep. The willow trees sway in the breeze. Their roots will soon wrap around what remains. The British plant guards nearby, not for reverence, but to prevent tampering. Rumors have already begun that his body would be stolen, that the French would demand it returned, that someone would open the tomb. But for now, it stays, unopened, undisturbed, unnamed. You return to Longwood House that night. The room where he died is untouched. The chair still faces the window. His last writing desk remains. A quill lies beside a half-written note. You do not read it. You already know how it ends. Not with conquest, not with glory, but with 4 sealed boxes. In a nameless grave, beneath trees that will never speak. The body that wouldn't stay buried. 19 years later, the coffin is opened. You are not on Saint Helena anymore. You are in Paris, in a different world. The year is 1840. And France, hungry for glory, desperate for meaning, has demanded the return of Napoleon Bonaparte. They call it le retour des cendres, the return of the ashes. But what they find is not ashes. Blank, underscore, blank. It begins with political theater. King Louis Philippe of France, trying to unite a divided nation, arranges to bring Napoleon's remains back from exile. The plan is announced with pomp. A new tomb will be built under the Dôme des Invalides. A procession will cross the Seine, and the people will reclaim their fallen emperor. A warship, La Belle Poule, is sent to Saint Helena under Prince de Joinville. The British, grudging and watchful, allow the exhumation. But you remember what was left behind. You were there when the body was buried. You remember the smell, the 4 coffins, the way death soaked into the earth. Now, that ground is opened again. Blank, underscore, blank. October 15th, 1840. You watch as the first stone slab is lifted. Then the next. Then the next. Workers, soldiers, and officials gather around the pit. Earth is cleared. The tin coffin is reached first, corroded and weeping with moisture. It is pried open. Inside, the mahogany one, still intact. They continue. The lead coffin is next. Heavy, cold. It takes hours to cut through. And when they finally do, what they see halts every breath in the valley. The body of Napoleon Bonaparte is intact. Blank, underscore, blank. Not skeleton, not dust, flesh. His face, pale but recognizable, hands crossed. The green uniform of the Chasseur de la Garde still clings to his chest. The boots are in place. His hair, still dark. His skin, preserved. There is no smell. The embalming, rough as it was, and the sealed coffins have performed something unnatural, a preserved emperor. Witnesses report being overwhelmed. Some kneel, others weep. A British officer turns away. It's as if Napoleon has been sleeping. Some whisper that he does not look dead at all. You are there, you look down, and the memory returns. The vomiting of black blood, the shaking hands, the coughs, the smell, but none of that is here now. Here, he looks peaceful. That is the shock. Blank. Underscore. Blank. The body is carefully transferred. Not to a cart this time, but to a black and gold funerary carriage designed like a Roman triumph. Draped in velvet, gilded in eagles, it sails from Saint Helena to Cherbourg, then across France. People line the roads, crowds chant his name, old veterans stand in uniform, children wave flags. Paris trembles with nostalgia. You watch the procession from a rooftop. The crowd is massive. The Seine is lined with soldiers and spectators. The drums beat slow and deep. The coffin arrives at Les Invalides on December 15, 1840. It rains. Not heavily, just enough to gloss the streets and blur the torches. They carry him in. You walk behind, down into the crypt. The new tomb is not yet finished, so the body is placed in a temporary resting chamber. Draped in flags, surrounded by laurel. It will take 20 more years for the final sarcophagus, red quartzite from Finland, to be completed. But none of that matters now. He is home. The people chant his name. Vive l'Empereur. They do not see the man who bled black on linen. They see the general, the ruler, the myth. You know better. You remember the ulcer, the screaming, the shaking, the basin of blood. You remember Saint Helena, but you also know why they cheer. This is no longer just a man. This is France's corpse, gilded in memory, wrapped in silence. Blank. Underscore. Blank. Years later, the body is moved one final time. April 2nd, 1861. You return to Les Invalides. The sarcophagus is ready. The crypt is illuminated by golden light. Priests stand in white, officials in medals. No British guards this time. Only France. The coffins are opened one by one. Tin, mahogany, lead, ebony, just as before. The body? Still preserved. Still whole. Still resting. You are older now. The faces around you have changed. But when you look into the final coffin, you see the same face you saw 19 years earlier. His cheeks have sunken slightly. The lips faded, but the eyes remain closed. The uniform intact. The silence complete. He is lowered into the red stone. No blood this time. No vomiting. No cries. Only gravity, carrying an empire's corpse into the earth. One final time. Blank. Underscore. Blank. They seal the crypt. They etch his name in stone. Napoleon. No dates. No title. Just the name. You leave in silence. Because you remember what they do not. You remember the smell of his room. The black blood. The fever. And the basin you once carried. You remember the body that wouldn't stay buried. The illness that killed the empire. You do not forget what you saw. Not just the body. Not just the blood. But the long, slow unraveling of power from within. And now, years later, you ask yourself, what really killed Napoleon Bonaparte? You are not the only one. From the moment of his death on May 5, 1821, doctors, historians, and enemies alike have tried to name the illness. Was it poison, as he suspected? Was it inherited? Was it the food, the medicine? Or was it simply the toll of too many battles, some of them waged inside his own body? You remember the symptoms: pain in the upper abdomen, vomiting of black blood, swollen belly, loss of appetite, exhaustion, weight loss, episodes of confusion. They were all there, documented by Dr. Arnott, Dr. Antomarchi, Barry O'Meara, and even in Napoleon's own dictations. But one finding stood above all: the ulcer in the pyloric region of his stomach. A gaping, inflamed, blackened wound, about 3.8 centimeters wide, raised, indurated, and surrounded by necrotic tissue, found during autopsy, photographed, sketched, preserved in medical annals. Dr. Antomarchi called it un ulcere cancero, a cancerous ulcer. Most modern physicians agree. Today, it would likely be classified as advanced gastric carcinoma. And you saw it with your own eyes. Blank. Underscore. Blank. But there are complications. In the decades that followed, new theories emerged, each built on fragments. One theory, popular in the 1960s, claimed arsenic poisoning. Hair samples taken from Napoleon's preserved remains showed elevated levels of arsenic. But so did the hair of his contemporaries. Arsenic was present in wallpaper, wine, cosmetics, even medications of the time. And you remember, he died slowly. Not with convulsions, not with the vomiting of pure bile, but with erosion, not shock. His was a death of weeks, not days. Other scholars have pointed to his poor diet in exile, heavy meat, overcooked vegetables, moldy bread, wine with impurities, his increasingly sedentary lifestyle, the emotional stress of confinement, years of mercury-based treatments for minor ailments. All these may have weakened the walls. But the core was something deeper. Inherited. Napoleon's father, Carlo Bonaparte, died at age 39 of stomach cancer. He showed similar symptoms: burning abdominal pain, dramatic weight loss, fatigue. Napoleon was aware of this. In 1817, he told Dr. O'Meara, "My father died of a disease of the pylorus. I believe I shall die of it too." He wasn't wrong. The genetic pattern, today classified under hereditary diffuse gastric cancer, HDGC, could easily have passed through generations. Uncurable, invisible, slow. You remember the blood. The vomit was dark because it had been digested. The blood had pooled in the stomach, oxidized, then came up in thick, black streams. The doctors called it coffee grounds, emesis. You called it what it was: internal death made visible. Blank. Underscore. Blank. But it wasn't just the body that died. It was the empire. You realized this one evening. Years later, sitting by the Seine, the name Napoleon had once meant unity, command, victory. But in those last years, sick, vomiting, forgotten, it became something else. His body mirrored the fall of the empire. Once vigorous, then bloated, then unstable, then torn apart from within. France, too, had hemorrhaged, lost ground, lost morale, lost belief. The same disease that ate through his stomach had, in metaphor, eaten through his legacy. Blank. Underscore. Blank. You remember the black blood on the linens. You remember how it stained everything it touched: his shirt, his pillow, the walls. And you see the symbol now. That blackness was not just gastric. It was imperial. It was the truth no uniform could hide. Napoleon's final years, exiled, sick, suspicious, rotting, revealed what no coronation ceremony could disguise: that no power, no myth, no army is immune to entropy. Not even emperors. The empire died the day his stomach began to bleed. Because how can a nation worship a man who can no longer hold down soup? How can men march for someone who cannot rise from bed? Blank. Underscore. Blank. And yet, they brought him home. They carried his coffin on golden wheels. They wept. They knelt. They called his name, not because they forgot the blood, but because they chose not to remember it. That is the other illness: memory. France did not bury a body. It buried an idea, and like any idea, it can be exhumed, wrapped in flags and silence. But you remember. You, who stood beside the basin. You, who heard the last breath. You, who watched the blood darken before the light dimmed. You know what truly killed Napoleon Bonaparte. It wasn't a battlefield. It wasn't poison. It wasn't the British. It was the same thing that claims all empires. In the end, a wound that never healed. The man in the marble tomb. You've seen it. The marble floor, the golden dome, the deep, echoing rotunda beneath Les Invalides. You've stood at the edge of the circle, peering down into the crypt, where a single red sarcophagus rests beneath 12 sculpted angels. You are not alone. The air is silent, heavy. Visitors murmur in every language. They lean over the railing and whisper his name. Napoleon. But none of them know what you know. None of them saw the basin of black blood. None of them held the sheets soaked with acid rot. None of them smelled the inside of that first coffin on Saint Helena. You did, and that's why the tomb, so grand, so permanent, feels almost dishonest. Blank. Blank. The sarcophagus is carved from red porphyry, a stone once reserved for Roman emperors. Beneath it, a green granite pedestal from the Vosges. Surrounding it, a circle of white marble, etched with the names of Napoleon's greatest victories: Austerlitz, Marengo, Jena, Wagram. But his last battle isn't listed. Saint Helena, where he fought not Wellington, nor coalitions, but his own body, where the stomach ulcer grew like a shadow, where the retching never stopped, where the man who had once ridden ahead of cannon fire could not lift a spoon to his mouth, where power leaked from his pores, just as blood leaked from his mouth. They do not etch that into marble. Blank. Blank. Above the tomb, a mosaic glows beneath the dome, victory crowning Napoleon. Below, a chapel, gilded chaplains' stalls, carved eagles, flags of conquest, an altar in white and gold. Everything speaks of majesty, but you remember the room at Longwood House. Wooden shutters, linens soaked through, a chamber pot never far from reach. No altar, no crown, only a bed and silence. The tomb says, glory. The room said, mortality. Blank. Blank. Around the sarcophagus, a ring of female statues, each bearing a different symbol: justice, strength, wisdom, religion. But none of them hold a basin. None of them wipe a fevered forehead. None of them wait in the dark, listening to an emperor cry out for his first wife. Long dead, you once heard him whisper, Josephine, in the final hour. Voice wet with fluid he could not cough clear. That sound, that tremble, is not carved into stone. No sculptor will ever capture it. Blank. Blank. You descend into the crypt. It's cold here. The light is dim. The marble echoes every footstep. You walk slowly, remembering the weight of 4 coffins. Napoleon lies inside that red stone, encased, protected, preserved. But you know the truth. Beneath the polished surface lies a body once bloated with fluid. Bloated with fear, a man who died surrounded not by flags, but by towels soaked in fluid so dark you mistook it for ink. Inside that tomb is not glory. It is a memory of what death does to kings. Blank. Blank. You look up at the oculus. Light pours down. Tourists take photos. Children ask questions. And for a moment, you wonder, what if they knew? What if they saw the stomach laid open? What if they smelled what you smelled? What if they watched him struggle to speak, choke on his own blood, and die not in battle, but in a room too small for empire? Would they still whisper? Would they still build monuments? Would they still kneel? Or would they turn away? Blank. Blank. You don't stay long, because to you, this place is not a tomb. It is a revision, a retelling, a stone mask to cover a rotting truth. You've carried linens that had to be burned. You've seen the ulcer that tore through history. You've watched blood drip from power like wax from a dying candle. Blank. Blank. And yet, you do not look away. Because even in death, perhaps especially in death, Napoleon remains a lesson. A monument not to greatness, but to the cost of it, A man who rose above Europe, only to be brought low by a wound no army could defend. The man in the marble tomb is not just Napoleon. He is all of us. Pride, ambition, genius, reduced to organs, fluids, and decay. The red sarcophagus shines, but the blood you saw was darker than stone, and the silence you remember is heavier than the marble around you. You place your hand on the cold railing, and you remember, because someone must, blank, underscore, blank. You are not a tourist in time. You are a witness, and what you remember is enough to keep him from vanishing forever.